The spotlight burns hot on Jasmine's dark skin as she stands center stage at the Grand Meridian Theater. Her worn sneakers squeak against polished wood. The billionaire judge Richard Vanderbilt leans back in his chair, smirking. His voice booms through the microphone. "Sing something, girl. Let's see if you can actually carry a tune." The audience of wealthy donors shifts uncomfortably. Jasmine's mother grips the auditorium doorframe, frozen. This moment will shatter everything Jasmine thought she knew about her family, her voice, and the price of dreams in America. 6 hours earlier, Jasmine Carter stepped off the number 47 bus with her mother, Teresa, into the blinding morning sun of downtown Chicago. They had left their apartment in Southside at 5:30 in the morning, catching 2 different buses to reach the Grand Meridian Theater. Teresa worked double shifts as a hospital custodian, scrubbing floors and cleaning rooms, while doctors and nurses passed by without seeing her. She had saved for 3 months to afford the $50 entry fee for the Elite Youth Showcase, a prestigious talent competition that promised scholarships and industry connections. Jasmine clutched her grandmother's old music folder against her chest, the worn leather cracking at the edges. Inside were handwritten sheet music and lyrics she had spent months perfecting. The Grand Meridian Theater rose before them like a golden palace, all glass and marble and impossibility. Luxury cars pulled up to the entrance, one after another. A silver Mercedes, a black BMW, a white Tesla. Teenagers emerged in designer dresses and tailored suits, accompanied by parents in expensive sunglasses and professional coaches carrying instrument cases worth more than Teresa's monthly rent. Jasmine looked down at her church dress, the navy blue one she wore every Sunday, freshly ironed but obviously old. Her mother squeezed her hand. "You belong here just as much as anyone," Teresa whispered, but Jasmine heard the doubt beneath the encouragement. At the registration desk, a blonde woman in a cream-colored blazer looked up from her computer with a tight smile. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting they might be lost. "Jasmine Carter, checking in for the competition," Teresa said, presenting the confirmation email on her phone. The receptionist's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, let me see that confirmation again." She studied the email for a long moment, then checked her computer, then asked to see the email a third time. Behind them, a white family approached the desk, and the receptionist immediately brightened. "Welcome to the Elite Youth Showcase. You must be the Hendersons. Right this way." She processed their registration in seconds without asking for any confirmation at all. Jasmine and her mother exchanged a look but said nothing. They had learned long ago that pointing out these moments only made things worse. Finally, the receptionist printed Jasmine's name tag and handed it over. "The waiting area is through those doors," she said, already looking past them to the next family. Backstage, the contrast became even starker. The waiting area buzzed with nervous energy and expensive perfume. Jasmine found a seat in the corner and observed the other contestants. A girl with perfect auburn curls practiced scales with her vocal coach, who spoke in terms Jasmine didn't understand. "Remember your diaphragmatic breathing and your soft palate placement," the coach instructed. 2 boys compared notes about their summer programs at Juilliard Preparatory Division. A tall blonde girl showed off her custom-made gown, explaining that it cost $3,000 but was worth it for the stage presence. Nobody looked at Jasmine. Nobody said hello. She might as well have been invisible. Teresa sat beside her daughter, hands folded in her lap, trying to look confident, but Jasmine saw her mother's fingers trembling. "I'm going to find the restroom," Teresa said quietly. "Will you be okay?" Jasmine nodded, and her mother disappeared into the hallway. Left alone, Jasmine opened her grandmother's folder and reviewed her sheet music, the notes swimming before her eyes. A conversation drifted from 2 women standing near the refreshment table, their voices low but not low enough. "I heard they have to meet diversity quotas now," one said, a woman in a pearl necklace. "That's why standards have dropped so much," the other replied, glancing meaningfully in Jasmine's direction. "It's not really about talent anymore." Jasmine's face burned, but she kept her eyes on her music, pretending she hadn't heard. The stage manager appeared, a harried woman with a clipboard, announcing that the judges were ready. The 3 judges were introduced to scattered applause. Richard Vanderbilt, billionaire real estate developer and philanthropist, whose donations kept the theater running. Monica Chen, internationally acclaimed opera singer with performances at the Met. James Patterson, Grammy-winning music producer who had discovered several platinum-selling artists. They took their seats at the long table facing the stage, water bottles and notepads arranged before them. Vanderbilt looked bored already, checking his expensive watch. During the technical sound check, each contestant was called to test the microphone and provide their backing track. When Jasmine's name was called, she approached the sound technician, a young black man with kind eyes, and handed him her USB drive. As he loaded her track, she noticed Vanderbilt lean forward suddenly, staring at the roster sheet. His expression changed from bored indifference to something cold and calculating. He pulled out his phone and made a call, turning slightly away from the others. Jasmine couldn't hear most of it, but she caught fragments. "The Carter girl is here." "Yes, Marcus Carter's daughter. Time to settle an old score." Her stomach dropped. How did this stranger know her father's name? Marcus Carter had died 7 years ago, when Jasmine was 8. A heart attack at 42. Her memories of him were fading, replaced by her mother's stories and the few photographs they had. Nobody had ever mentioned a connection to anyone named Vanderbilt. The sound technician caught her eye and gave her a subtle nod, as if to say he had heard it too. "You're all set," he told her gently. "Your track sounds good." Jasmine returned to her seat, her heart pounding. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the air, in the way Vanderbilt kept glancing at the roster, in the predatory smile that played at the corners of his mouth. Teresa returned and immediately sensed her daughter's distress. "What happened?" Jasmine opened her mouth to explain, but the stage manager interrupted, announcing that performance order had been changed. Jasmine Carter would now perform last instead of 12th. No explanation given. Just a change. All the carefully managed anxiety about going in the middle of the pack evaporated, replaced by the torture of waiting through every other contestant, watching the judges grow tired, watching the audience's attention wane. Jasmine looked at her mother, and Teresa's face had gone pale. They both knew what this meant. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. Someone wanted Jasmine to fail. For the next 2 hours, Jasmine sat in the wings and watched 17 other contestants perform. Each one was polished, professional, and clearly well-trained. A boy of about 16 sang an operatic aria in Italian, his voice powerful and technically flawless. The judges smiled and applauded. Vanderbilt called him exceptional and a true artist. A girl performed a contemporary piece with a backing track that sounded professionally produced, complete with string arrangements and harmony vocals. Monica Chen praised her artistic maturity. Another contestant, a 13-year-old violin prodigy, played a classical piece so complex that Jasmine couldn't imagine the hours of practice it must have required. James Patterson leaned into his microphone. "That was incredible. You have a real future in this industry." The pattern became clear. These weren't just talented kids. These were young people, with resources, with access, with every advantage money could buy. Private coaches, expensive instruments, studio-quality backing tracks, professional styling, summer intensives at prestigious programs. The judges praised each one, offering constructive criticism wrapped in encouragement. "Beautiful tone, maybe just watch your breath control in the bridge. Excellent interpretation. Consider adding more dynamic variation. Outstanding technique, you should be very proud." The audience, filled with parents and donors and wealthy patrons of the arts, responded with enthusiastic applause after each performance. Cell phones recorded proud moments. People wiped away tears at particularly moving pieces. This was a community, Jasmine realized. A community she was not part of. She watched her competitors return backstage, glowing with adrenaline and relief, embraced by their families and coaches. She sat alone in the corner, her mother having been directed to the general audience seating. Finally, after the 17th contestant finished to thunderous applause, the stage manager called her name. "Jasmine Carter, you're up." Her legs felt like water as she stood. The walk to the stage seemed to take forever and no time at all. She pushed through the heavy curtain and stepped into the lights. The applause was noticeably different, scattered, polite, brief. She reached center stage and looked out at the sea of faces. Most were white, some Asian, a handful of Hispanic families. She spotted her mother in the back, standing near the door because all the seats were taken. Teresa pressed both hands to her heart, trying to smile, trying to be encouraging, but Jasmine saw the fear in her eyes. The judges sat before her like gods passing judgment. Monica Chen looked tired but attentive. James Patterson was scrolling through his phone. And Richard Vanderbilt stared at her with unconcealed contempt. "So," Vanderbilt said, not waiting for her to introduce herself, his voice amplified through the theater's sound system. "Jasmine Carter." He said her name like it tasted bad. "Tell us about yourself. Where do you go to school?" The question seemed innocent, but his tone suggested it was anything but. "King High School on the Southside," Jasmine answered, her voice smaller than she intended. "Ah, public school. And does your family have any musical background? Private training? Anything?" The way he asked made it clear he already knew the answer. "My grandmother taught me to sing in church," Jasmine said. "I've been in the choir since I was 6. "Church choir," Vanderbilt repeated, and several people in the audience chuckled. "How quaint. Can you even read sheet music? Or do you just sing by ear?" Heat flooded Jasmine's face. "I can read music, really." "And who taught you? Your public school music teacher? Or did you learn from YouTube videos?" More laughter rippled through the audience, though some people looked uncomfortable. Monica Chen shifted in her seat, frowning, but she said nothing. James Patterson continued checking his phone as if this conversation wasn't happening. Jasmine stood frozen under the hot lights, humiliation crawling over her skin like insects. This wasn't an interview. This was an interrogation designed to embarrass her. Vanderbilt leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. "You know, it's interesting that you're here, Miss Carter." "Very interesting indeed." He paused for effect, letting the silence build. "I knew your father." The words hit Jasmine like a physical blow. The theater went quiet. "Marcus Carter," Vanderbilt continued, his voice dripping with disdain, "tried to work with me about 15 years ago. Turned out to be quite the con man. Attempted to defraud my company, made all sorts of wild accusations when we caught him. Very dishonest man, your father." Jasmine's vision blurred. In the back of the theater, Teresa stood up, her voice breaking. "That's not true. Marcus was a good man. He was honest and he tried to do the right thing." Security guards immediately moved toward Teresa, and she fell silent, trembling with rage and grief. Vanderbilt ignored her completely, keeping his eyes locked on Jasmine. "Dishonesty often runs in families," he said, letting the implication hang in the air. "But perhaps you're different. Perhaps you actually have talent and not just excuses and victim stories." He gestured toward the microphone with mock generosity. "Please, entertain us, sing something. Prove you're not just another diversity admission trying to game the system. Show us you actually deserve to be here." The audience murmured. Some people looked away, uncomfortable with the naked cruelty. Others watched with fascination, enjoying the spectacle. A few held up their phones, recording. Jasmine stood center stage, her father's name hanging in the air like poison, her own legitimacy questioned before she had sung a single note, her mother crying in the back of the theater, and a billionaire smirking at her with pure malice. She had two choices. She could walk off this stage and preserve what little dignity remained, or she could sing. The ghost of her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory. "Your voice is your power, baby girl. Nobody can take it unless you give it away." Jasmine took a breath that seemed to come from the bottom of her soul. Jasmine stood at the microphone, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone in the theater must be able to hear it. The lights blazed down on her, hot and exposing. Vanderbilt's smirk hadn't wavered. The audience waited, some eager for entertainment, others clearly hoping this painful moment would end quickly. She had prepared a classical piece, an aria from an opera her grandmother loved, something safe and traditional that would show her technical ability. That's what she had practiced for months. That's what her backing track was designed for. But standing here now, humiliated and exposed, with her father's memory dragged through the mud by a man who clearly harbored some deep grudge, singing someone else's words in someone else's language felt impossible. It felt like a lie. If she was going to be judged, if she was going to fail, she would do it on her own terms, with her own truth. Jasmine lifted her chin and spoke into the microphone, her voice shaking but clear. "I'm going to perform an original song." The murmuring in the audience grew louder. Vanderbilt's eyebrows shot up, and his smirk widened into something uglier. "An original song?" He laughed. A sharp, cruel sound. "You wrote your own song? Oh, this should be entertaining." He turned to the audience, inviting them to share the joke. "Everyone, we have a singer-songwriter here. How precious." Laughter scattered through the crowd, louder this time. Some people clapped mockingly. A man in a tuxedo called out, "Let's hear it then." Jasmine's hands trembled as she signaled the sound technician. The young black man who had heard Vanderbilt's phone call earlier understood immediately. He abandoned the classical track she had prepared and loaded the other file she had given him, the one she never thought she would actually use, the one she had created alone in her bedroom on a borrowed keyboard, recording track by track on her phone. It wasn't professional, it wasn't polished, but it was hers. The opening notes filled the theater, a simple piano melody, melancholy and haunting. No strings, no production, just piano and space for a voice. Jasmine closed her eyes for a moment, blocking out the hostile faces, the glittering lights, the weight of expectation and contempt. She thought of her father. Not the man Vanderbilt had described, but the man she remembered. Coming home exhausted from working 3 jobs. Reading her bedtime stories, even when he could barely keep his eyes open. Teaching her that doing the right thing mattered more than doing the easy thing. She opened her eyes and began to sing. Her voice emerged soft at first, almost fragile, carrying the first verse about a man who worked until his hands bled to provide for his family. A man who believed in the promise of America, who thought hard work and honesty would be enough. The laughter died immediately. The mocking smiles faded. People stopped scrolling through their phones. The second verse built in intensity as Jasmine sang about a man who saw injustice and couldn't stay silent. A man who made one desperate attempt to fight back against a system designed to keep him down. A man who was punished for his integrity, whose name was destroyed, whose family was left to pick up the pieces. Her voice grew stronger, rawer, filled with 7 years of grief and confusion and unanswered questions. The chorus hit like a wave. You can't break what's already been broken. You can't take what was never really mine. You can't silence all the words left unspoken. Truth survives, truth survives, truth survives. The theater was absolutely silent except for her voice and the piano. Every eye was fixed on her. Several people in the audience had tears streaming down their faces. Even James Patterson had put down his phone, sitting forward in his chair, completely focused. Monica Chen's hand covered her mouth, her own eyes glistening. The third verse stripped everything bare. Jasmine sang about a heart attack at 42. About a man who died, still trying to prove his worth to a world that had decided his value before he ever had a chance. About a daughter who grew up with a ghost and 1,000 questions. About a mother who worked herself to exhaustion, trying to fill the space one man used to occupy. Her voice cracked on certain words, but the imperfection made it more powerful, more true. This wasn't a performance. This was testimony. This was a daughter defending her father's memory in front of the man who had destroyed it. As she moved into the final chorus, something unexpected happened. The screen behind her, which had displayed each contestant's name and school, suddenly came alive with images. The sound technician, acting on his own initiative, began displaying news articles. Community organizer exposes predatory lending practices. Local man files complaint against Vanderbilt properties. Whistleblower terminated after revealing discrimination. Marcus Carter, 42, dies of heart attack after year-long legal battle. The articles flashed on the screen, one after another, painting a picture completely different from the one Vanderbilt had presented. Marcus Carter wasn't a con man. He was a whistleblower. He had worked for Vanderbilt's company as a loan officer and had discovered systematic discrimination against black families. He had tried to expose it through proper channels. He had been destroyed for his efforts. Jasmine sang the final note, letting it ring through the theater, letting it carry all the pain and pride and defiance she felt. Then silence. 3 heartbeats of absolute stunned silence. Then the audience exploded. Not polite applause, not scattered clapping. An eruption. People leaped to their feet. Some were crying openly. Others were shouting approval. A wave of sound and emotion crashed over the stage. But Jasmine's eyes were locked on Richard Vanderbilt. His face had gone purple with rage. He shot to his feet so violently his chair toppled backward. "This is outrageous!" he roared into his microphone. That display was completely unauthorized. Those images were not approved. Someone fire that technician immediately. This is a violation of competition rules. Monica Chen stood as well, her voice clear and firm. "Sit down, Richard." "Excuse me?" I said, "Sit down." The opera singer's dark eyes flashed. That was the most honest, powerful performance I have seen in 20 years of judging competitions. That girl just sang truth that half this city has been trying to ignore. She manipulated the audience with lies and propaganda. Vanderbilt sputtered. "Those articles are out of context. They're public record," a voice called from the audience. A tall black man in a gray suit stood up, pulling out a press badge. "Derek Washington, Chicago Tribune. I covered the Marcus Carter story 15 years ago. Every word on that screen is true. Marcus Carter exposed your company's discriminatory lending practices that specifically targeted black families with subprime loans. He wasn't a con man, he was a whistleblower. And you destroyed him for it." The theater erupted again, this time with shocked exclamations and furious conversations. Derek pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly, live tweeting the confrontation. Within seconds, hashtags began forming, spreading across social media like wildfire. Vanderbilt pointed a shaking finger at Derek. "I will sue you for defamation. I will sue this theater. I will sue that girl and her mother." But his threats sounded hollow now, desperate. James Patterson finally spoke, holding up his phone. "I recorded the whole performance. This is exactly what we've been missing in music. Real stories, real voices, real courage." Monica Chen turned to the other judges and the event organizers who had rushed onto the stage. "I move that we disqualify our own judging process. That performance transcended any rubric we have. The winner is clear." Before anyone could respond, security guards approached the judges' table. But they weren't heading for Teresa or the sound technician. They stopped behind Richard Vanderbilt. The head of the theater, a woman in an elegant black dress, spoke into a microphone. "Mr. Vanderbilt, we're going to have to ask you to leave. Your behavior tonight has been inappropriate and damaging to our institution's reputation." Vanderbilt's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You can't. I fund this theater. My donations keep you running. We'll find other donors," the woman said coldly. "Please leave quietly, or we'll have you escorted out." As the security guards flanked him, Vanderbilt's eyes found Jasmine one last time. The look he gave her was pure hatred. Not the hot anger of the moment, but cold, calculating malice. A promise of retribution. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing through the suddenly quiet theater. The backstage area transformed into chaos within minutes. Reporters who had been in the audience swarmed toward Jasmine, microphones and cameras thrust forward. Other contestants gathered in clusters, some looking awed, others uncertain, a few clearly resentful. Event organizers rushed around trying to restore order while simultaneously fielding phone calls from board members and donors. Jasmine found herself surrounded, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Questions flew at her from every direction. "How did you know about your father's connection to Vanderbilt? Have you been planning this confrontation? What do you want to say to other young people facing discrimination?" She opened her mouth but couldn't find words. Her legs felt weak, the adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. Teresa pushed through the crowd, and Jasmine fell into her mother's arms. They stood there holding each other while cameras flashed and voices swirled around them. "I'm so proud of you," Teresa whispered. "Baby, your daddy would be so proud. You did what he tried to do. You told the truth, and this time people listened." Derek Washington, the Tribune reporter, approached respectfully. waiting until mother and daughter separated. Miss Carter, I just want you to know that I've wanted to write a follow-up to your father's story for years. My editors killed it every time. But this changes things. The public is paying attention now. He showed them his phone. Twitter was exploding. The hashtag Vanderbilt exposed was trending nationally. Video clips of Jasmine's performance had already been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. Comments poured in, most supportive, some skeptical, a few viciously cruel. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Every platform was lighting up with the story. Powerful billionaire humiliates black teen at talent show. Girl's song exposes decades of housing discrimination. Vanderbilt Corporation under fire after viral video. Monica Chen approached, her elegant composure slightly shaken. Jasmine, that was extraordinary. I want you to know that I meant what I said. In all my years in music, I've never heard anything more genuine. She handed Jasmine a business card. Please, call me. I'd like to discuss your future, if you're interested. James Patterson followed, still holding up his phone. I'm sending this performance to every label I work with. You have something special, kid. Something money can't buy. The event organizers gathered everyone for an emergency announcement. The director of the showcase, a nervous man in an ill-fitting suit, stepped forward with a microphone. After consultation with our remaining judges and board members, we've made a decision. Given the extraordinary circumstances of this evening and the clear response from both judges and audience, we're awarding first place to Jasmine Carter. Applause erupted, though not universal. Some parents of other contestants looked furious. A woman in a fur stole actually booed, but most people clapped, many still wiping tears from their eyes. The prize includes a $5,000 scholarship to be used for music, education, or college expenses, the director continued. $5,000. It was more money than Jasmine had ever imagined having at once. It was a semester of community college. It was breathing room for her mother. It was possibility. Emma Hartley, a white girl who had performed a beautiful classical piece earlier and finished second, pushed through the crowd. Jasmine tensed, expecting hostility. Instead, Emma's eyes were red from crying. That was incredible, Emma said quietly. I've been taking voice lessons since I was 6. My parents spend thousands every year on my training, but I've never sung anything that mattered. Not like that. Not something real. She looked around at the other contestants who had gathered close. We all knew something was wrong tonight. The way he talked to you. We saw it. But we were too scared to say anything. I'm sorry. Several other contestants nodded, some adding their own apologies. Not all of them. Some remained silent, their privilege protecting them from having to acknowledge uncomfortable truths, but enough spoke up to matter. The celebration lasted another 30 minutes before Teresa and Jasmine were finally able to extract themselves. They walked out of the Grand Meridian Theater into the cool Chicago night, everything feeling surreal and dreamlike. The scholarship check was in Teresa's purse. Business cards from industry professionals stuffed Jasmine's pockets. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, friend requests, messages from people she had never met. They caught the bus home, Teresa clutching her daughter's hand the entire ride. At 11:45 at night, they climbed the stairs to their third-floor apartment, exhausted and emotionally wrung out. Jasmine wanted nothing more than to collapse into bed. Teresa's phone rang as she fumbled with her keys. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen, and her face went pale. It's my supervisor at the hospital. She answered, her voice hesitant. Hello? Yes, this is Teresa Carter. Jasmine watched her mother's expression crumble as she listened. What? No, that's not. I've worked there for 12 years. My credentials are all verified. This doesn't make any sense. Teresa's hand shook. Suspended? Effective immediately? But I need that job. I have a daughter. Her voice broke. You're investigating what allegations? Who made these allegations? The conversation lasted another minute before Teresa hung up, staring at her phone in disbelief. They're suspending me, pending an investigation into fabricated credentials. Someone claimed I lied on my job application over a decade ago. It's absurd. Everything I put on that application was true, and they verified it all when they hired me. Jasmine's stomach turned cold. They had won tonight, but already the victory felt hollow. She opened their apartment door, and her mother gasped. On the welcome mat sat a large envelope, official-looking, with a law firm's name embossed across the front. Teresa picked it up with trembling fingers and tore it open. Her eyes scanned the document inside, and all color drained from her face. "What is it?" Jasmine asked, though she already knew nothing good came in envelopes like that at midnight. "Eviction notice," Teresa whispered. "For lease violations. It lists damages to the apartment that don't exist, noise complaints that were never made, and late rent payments that I have bank statements proving I paid on time." The document was dated today, just hours after the showcase. There was no way a landlord could process an eviction this quickly unless someone with money and influence had made phone calls, had applied pressure, had used their power to strike back. Jasmine thought of the look Vanderbilt had given her as security escorted him out. That cold promise of revenge. He had lost the public battle. The videos were spreading. His reputation was crumbling. But he was a billionaire with connections throughout the city, and they were a single mother and teenage daughter living paycheck to paycheck in an apartment they might lose. The realization hit like ice water. They hadn't won. They had just painted a target on their backs. Teresa sank onto their worn couch. The eviction notice clutched in her hands and began to cry. Not the proud tears from earlier, but deep, wrenching sobs of fear and exhaustion. Jasmine sat beside her mother, wrapping her arms around her, trying to be strong, even as her own fear threatened to overwhelm her. Outside their window, a black SUV parked across the street, engine idling, windows tinted dark. It sat there for 5 minutes, then 10, a silent threat before finally driving away. Inside the apartment, mother and daughter held each other in the dark, and Jasmine understood with devastating clarity that singing the truth had consequences, and those consequences had just begun. By morning, their small apartment was surrounded by people. Not threats this time, but neighbors who had seen the viral videos. Miss Johnson from downstairs brought up breakfast. The Martinez family offered their spare room if the eviction went through. Old Mr. Williams, a retired teacher, promised to make some calls to lawyers he knew. The Southside community had always taken care of its own, but Jasmine saw the fear beneath their kindness. Everyone knew what it meant to go against someone with Vanderbilt's power. By noon, someone had started a GoFundMe for Jasmine and Teresa. It raised $3,000 in the first 2 hours, then $5,000, then $8,000. Strangers from across the country donated, leaving comments about being inspired by Jasmine's courage, about having faced similar injustices, about wanting to help. But money couldn't solve all their problems. Teresa's suspension remained in effect. The hospital's Human Resources Department claimed they needed to conduct a thorough investigation that would take weeks, maybe months. Without her paycheck, even with the scholarship and GoFundMe donations, they were one crisis away from homelessness. A lawyer from the Southside Legal Aid Clinic came to their apartment that evening, a tired woman named Patricia Rodriguez, who volunteered her time for families who couldn't afford representation. She reviewed the eviction notice with a practiced eye. "This is garbage," Patricia said bluntly. "Every violation listed is either provably false or so minor it wouldn't justify eviction. Your landlord has never filed complaints before, never sent warnings. This is retaliatory, and that's illegal. Can you stop it?" Teresa asked desperately. "I can slow it down, make them prove their case in court, which they can't. But Mrs. Carter, you need to understand something. These kinds of legal battles take time and energy. They'll drag it out, file motion after motion, try to exhaust you into giving up. That's what people with money do. They use the system as a weapon. So we just live in fear?" "You live smart," Patricia said. "Document everything, keep records, don't give them any ammunition, and be prepared for things to get worse before they get better." Things got worse. On Monday morning, Jasmine returned to King High School for the first time since the showcase. She had hoped the support she had seen online would carry over into the hallways. Instead, she found her locker vandalized. Someone had spray-painted the word liar across it in red letters. Crude racial slurs decorated the bottom. Her hands shook as she tried to open it, and when she finally did, she found all her books torn to pieces. Photos ripped, assignments destroyed, months of work ruined. Principal Morrison called her to his office before first period. He was a heavy-set black man in his 50s who had always been kind to Jasmine, who had encouraged her to enter the showcase in the first place. But when she sat across from his desk, she saw only discomfort in his eyes. "Jasmine, we need to talk about what happened this weekend," he began. "I saw my locker. That's being handled. We're reviewing security footage. But that's not what I'm referring to." He shifted papers on his desk, not meeting her eyes. "Your behavioral record is being reviewed by the district. Some concerns have been raised." "What concerns?" "I've never been in trouble. Past incidents that perhaps weren't properly documented at the time, a confrontation with a teacher in 9th grade, disruptive behavior in several classes, academic integrity questions." Jasmine felt her blood run cold. "None of that is true. You know me, Principal Morrison. I've been here since freshman year. I've never had any disciplinary issues. The district has asked me to conduct a full review. Until it's complete, you're being removed from all extracurricular activities, including choir." The words hit like a slap. Choir was the one place in school where Jasmine felt like herself, where her voice mattered. "You can't do this. I'm sorry, Jasmine. My hands are tied." But his hands weren't tied. Jasmine realized with sick certainty that someone had made a phone call. Someone had applied pressure. She thought about the school's new gymnasium, funded by a donation from Vanderbilt Properties, the arts program that bore his name on a bronze plaque in the lobby. Principal Morrison needed his job. He had a family to feed, and she was one student easily sacrificed to protect the school's funding. The pattern continued through the day. Mrs. Chen, who taught English and had always praised Jasmine's writing, returned an essay with a failing grade, citing poor structure and lack of evidence that Jasmine knew wasn't true. Mr. Phillips, her history teacher, called on her repeatedly in class, his questions hostile and gotcha style, designed to embarrass rather than educate. At lunch, Jasmine sat alone. Her usual friends avoided her table, casting guilty glances but not approaching. She saw them whispering, saw the way they looked at her with something like fear. Ashley Thompson, who had been Jasmine's best friend since middle school, finally approached at the end of lunch period. "I'm sorry," Ashley said quietly. "My mom says I can't hang out with you anymore. She says you're too controversial, and it might hurt my college applications." "Ashley, we've been friends for 4 years. I know. I'm really sorry. But my mom said if I don't stay away from you, she'll make me quit the soccer team, and I need that for my scholarship applications." Ashley walked away, leaving Jasmine sitting alone in the crowded cafeteria, an island of isolation in a sea of students who had decided she was too dangerous to know. The next day, Jasmine discovered that a major project she had submitted 2 weeks earlier had been lost. Her computer science teacher claimed there was no record of her turning it in. The missing assignment dropped her grade from an A to an F. Her college recommendation letters, which had been in progress with 3 teachers, were suddenly and indefinitely delayed. One teacher said she was too busy. Another claimed she didn't know Jasmine well enough. The third stopped responding to emails. Jasmine's GPA, which had been a solid 3.8, began to plummet as grades were mysteriously changed or assignments went missing. Her mother noticed her coming home silent and withdrawn. Teresa tried to help, tried to fight back, but her own battles consumed most of her energy. The hospital had formally terminated her employment, citing the ongoing investigation. Appeals could take months. They would need to find a new job, but any application would require a reference from her previous employer, and the hospital's Human Resources Department would only confirm that she had been terminated for cause. One evening, Jasmine stayed late after school for a makeup test in biology. When she finally left the building at 6 in the evening, the parking lot was empty, except for a few teachers' cars. She started the long walk to the bus stop, her backpack heavy with books she wasn't sure anyone would grade fairly. A car pulled up beside her. Not the black SUV from before, but a silver sedan with tinted windows. It crawled along at walking speed, matching her pace. Jasmine's heart began to race. She walked faster. The car kept up. She was still half a block from the main street where there would be witnesses, stores, safety. The car's window rolled down. Jasmine didn't look, prepared to run, but a woman's voice called out. "Jasmine, wait. I'm not here to hurt you." Against her better judgment, Jasmine glanced at the car. The driver was a middle-aged Asian woman in an expensive business suit. It took Jasmine a moment to recognize her. "Miss Chen? From the showcase?" Monica Chen, the opera singer, nodded. "Please, I need to talk to you. Can I give you a ride somewhere?" Every stranger danger lesson screamed at Jasmine to refuse, but something in Monica's face seemed genuine, desperate even. "Just to the bus stop," Jasmine said carefully. She got in the car, keeping her hand on the door handle, ready to jump out if needed. Monica drove slowly toward the main street. For a moment she said nothing, just stared ahead at the road. Then, "I know what Richard Vanderbilt is doing to you. The job loss, the eviction, the school harassment. I know because I've seen him do it before to people who cross him. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired of being silent." Monica's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm the daughter of Vanderbilt's business partner. I've been around that man my entire life. I've watched him destroy people for sport. I've watched him use his money and power to bury anyone who threatens him. And I've collected evidence, for years." She pulled up to the bus stop but didn't unlock the doors yet. "I have documents, emails, financial records, proof of systematic discrimination in his business practices going back decades. I've been looking for someone brave enough to use it. When I saw you on that stage, when I heard you sing that song, I knew. You're strong enough to finish what your father started." Jasmine stared at this stranger, who held out impossible hope like a lifeline. "Why didn't you come forward before?" "Fear, self-preservation, the same reasons everyone stays silent." Monica's voice broke slightly. "But I can't watch another family destroyed. I won't." She reached into her purse and pulled out a USB drive. "Everything is on here. Give it to that reporter, Derek Washington. Give it to lawyers. Give it to whoever can use it. Just promise me you'll see this through." Jasmine took the USB drive with shaking hands. "He'll come after you too. Let him try. I'm rich, connected, and famous enough that destroying me won't be easy. You were vulnerable, and he targeted you for it. But together, maybe we can fight back." Monica finally unlocked the doors. As Jasmine stepped out, the opera singer added, "Your father was brave to stand up to a corrupt system. You're brave to continue his fight. Don't let them make you small. Don't let them silence you." The car drove away, leaving Jasmine standing at the bus stop with a USB drive that might contain either salvation or further destruction. She closed her fist around it and made a choice. She would not be small. She would not be silent. If they wanted a fight, she would give them one. The USB drive contained over 2,000 documents. Jasmine and Teresa spent an entire night reviewing them on their old laptop, the screen glowing in the darkened apartment as they scrolled through years of evidence. Emails from Vanderbilt to his loan officers with subject lines like neighborhood risk assessment and demographic targeting. The contents used coded language, but the intent was clear. Deny loans to applicants in certain zip codes. Flag applications from people with certain surnames. Charge higher interest rates based on the race of the neighborhood rather than the creditworthiness of the applicant. Financial records showing that black families with identical credit scores, identical incomes, and identical down payments were rejected for loans at rates 3 times higher than white applicants. When they were approved, they were steered towards subprime loans with predatory terms, even when they qualified for better rates. Internal memos discussing how to avoid fair housing complaints. Strategies for making discrimination look like legitimate business decisions. Instructions to loan officers on how to document rejections in ways that couldn't be legally challenged. And, most damning of all, a series of emails from 15 years ago about Marcus Carter. Vanderbilt writing to his legal team that they needed to eliminate the problem of a loan officer who was threatening to blow the whistle. Discussions of how to discredit Marcus, destroy his professional reputation, and ensure he could never work in the industry again. A final email sent 2 days before Marcus's heart attack, where Vanderbilt wrote, "Carter is finished. He'll never recover from this. Let him serve as an example." Teresa cried reading those emails, seeing in black and white the calculated destruction of her husband. Jasmine felt a cold fury settle into her bones. This wasn't just about her family. This was about hundreds, maybe thousands of families who had been denied the chance to build wealth through homeownership. Families who had been trapped in cycles of poverty because a billionaire decided their zip code made them unworthy. The next morning, Jasmine contacted Derek Washington. The reporter arrived at their apartment within an hour, accompanied by 2 colleagues from other publications who had been following the story. They spent 6 hours reviewing the documents, verifying sources, cross-referencing dates and names. "This is it," Derek said, his voice shaking with excitement and anger. "This is what we needed. We can prove systematic discrimination. We can prove intentional fraud. We can prove that Marcus Carter was retaliated against for whistleblowing." "Can you publish it?" Teresa asked. "My editor killed the last story about Vanderbilt, said we didn't have enough proof and couldn't risk the lawsuit." Derek smiled grimly. "Then I'll take it to someone who will. I've already been contacted by 3 other outlets interested in the story, and with evidence this solid, they can't ignore it." He looked at Jasmine. "Are you prepared for what comes next? When this goes public, the spotlight will be intense. Vanderbilt will fight back hard. There will be lawyers, depositions, possible threats." "I'm already losing everything," Jasmine said. "My mom's job, our apartment. My school is turning against me. What else can he take?" "Your safety," Derek said seriously. "I'm not trying to scare you, but you need to understand. When people this powerful get cornered, they get dangerous." "Then we make sure we're not alone," Jasmine replied. "We find others he's hurt. We build a coalition. We make this bigger than just one family." Over the next week, that's exactly what they did. Derek's articles began appearing, first in independent online outlets, then in larger publications as the story gained traction. Each article included a call for other victims to come forward. The response was overwhelming. Families who had been denied loans despite perfect credit. Borrowers who had been steered into predatory mortgages and lost their homes. Communities that had been systematically redlined and deprived of investment. Former employees of Vanderbilt's companies who had witnessed discriminatory practices but had been too afraid to speak. They came forward by the dozens, then by the hundreds. A law firm specializing in civil rights cases agreed to file a class action lawsuit. The lawyers worked for contingency fees, meaning Jasmine and Teresa didn't need money up front. The firm had successfully taken on major corporations before and wasn't intimidated by Vanderbilt's wealth. Young activists on social media amplified the story. Justice for Jasmine and Vanderbilt Truth became trending hashtags again, but this time backed by hard evidence rather than just emotion. Threads explaining the long history of housing discrimination in America, how systemic racism in lending created the racial wealth gap, how people like Vanderbilt profited from keeping communities of color impoverished. Churches organized. Community centers held meetings. Local politicians who had been silent suddenly found their voices, calling for investigations and reform. The movement grew beyond Jasmine, becoming something larger and more powerful than one girl's talent show humiliation. But success brought new dangers. The cease and desist letters multiplied. Vanderbilt's lawyers filed motions to dismiss the lawsuit, to seal the evidence, to impose gag orders on everyone involved. They subpoenaed bank records, school files, medical histories, digging for anything they could use to discredit the plaintiffs. Jasmine's school situation deteriorated further. An accusation surfaced that she had plagiarized an essay from 2 years ago. The allegation was false, but it triggered an official review that put her academic standing in jeopardy. Her locker was vandalized again. Someone spread rumors that she was using the controversy to get attention, that she was faking everything for fame and money. Teresa found temporary work cleaning offices at night, but the pay was half what she had made at the hospital, and the hours were brutal. The GoFundMe money was running out. The eviction case wound through housing court, temporarily stayed but not resolved. Some days, Jasmine woke up and wondered if fighting was worth it, if maybe Ashley had been right to walk away, if maybe survival mattered more than justice. On one particularly bad day, when she had been called to the principal's office for the third time that week, when another grade had mysteriously changed, when she had overheard classmates joking that she should just go back to Africa if she hated America so much, Jasmine came home ready to give up. She found her mother sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an envelope. "What is it?" Jasmine asked tiredly. Teresa looked up with tears in her eyes, but for the first time in weeks, they weren't tears of despair. "A letter from your father, from before he died." "What? How?" "I had it saved for your 16th birthday. I forgot about it with everything that's been happening. But your birthday was yesterday, and I missed it, and I'm sorry." Jasmine had forgotten her own birthday, too. Turning 16 should have been special, but it had passed unremarked in the chaos. She took the letter from her mother's trembling hands. Her father's handwriting, a little messy, full of crossed-out words and corrections. "My dearest Jasmine," it began. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm so sorry I'm not there to see the incredible woman I know you'll become. I'm writing this because I need you to understand something about the choice I made." Jasmine read through tears as her father explained his decision to expose Vanderbilt's company. How he had spent months gathering evidence. How he knew it would cost him everything but couldn't stay silent. "There's a moment in every person's life," Marcus had written, "when you have to choose between your comfort and your conscience, between staying safe and doing right. I know speaking up will destroy me. Vanderbilt is too powerful, too connected. But if I stay silent, I become complicit. I become part of the system that crushes people who look like us." He wrote about his hopes for Jasmine's future, about wanting her to grow up in a world where she was judged by her character and talents rather than the color of her skin, about knowing that change required sacrifice. The final paragraph broke her heart. "If something happens to me, don't seek revenge, seek change. Don't let bitterness consume you. Let purpose guide you. The fight for justice doesn't end with one person's victory or defeat. It's generational. And I trust you, my brilliant, talented, fierce daughter, to carry it forward. They can silence one voice, but they can't silence the echo." Jasmine clutched the letter to her chest and sobbed. Her mother wrapped her arms around her, and they cried together. But underneath the grief was something else. Purpose, clarity, strength. Her father had known this fight would outlive him. He had known the price, and paid it anyway. And he had trusted her to continue what he started. Jasmine thought about giving up and realized she couldn't. Not because she was fearless, not because she was certain of victory, but because some things mattered more than fear. Some things mattered more than comfort. Justice mattered, truth mattered. Her father's memory mattered. She wiped her eyes, folded the letter carefully, and made her decision. She wouldn't give up. She wouldn't stay silent. She would fight. 2 days after reading her father's letter, everything changed. Jasmine woke to find her phone exploded with notifications. Derek Washington had published a major exposé in a national publication, complete with leaked documents, testimony from dozens of victims, and expert analysis. The Department of Justice announced a formal investigation into Vanderbilt's business practices, citing potential violations of the Fair Housing Act, wire fraud statutes, and civil rights laws. Federal agents seized documents from Vanderbilt Properties offices in 3 cities. The investigation would examine 2 decades of lending practices, potentially exposing billions of dollars in discriminatory loans. Financial markets reacted immediately. Vanderbilt Properties' stock price plummeted 30% in a single day. Credit rating agencies downgraded the company. Banks that had extended lines of credit began calling in loans, fearing association with the scandal. Corporate partners issued statements distancing themselves from Vanderbilt, emphasizing that they had been unaware of any discriminatory practices. Several board members resigned. Shareholders filed a lawsuit demanding accountability. The company that had seemed untouchable just weeks ago now teetered on the edge of collapse. News coverage intensified. Every major outlet ran stories about the scandal. Vanderbilt's face appeared on magazine covers with headlines like "The Billionaire's Fall" and "How One Teen Exposed Decades of Discrimination." Civil rights organizations held press conferences praising Jasmine's courage. Politicians who had previously accepted Vanderbilt's donations rushed to return the money and condemn his actions. The cultural conversation shifted. Social media exploded with discussions about systemic racism, housing discrimination, and the racial wealth gap. People shared their own stories of being denied loans, charged higher rates, or steered away from certain neighborhoods. The hashtag #HousingWhileBlack trended for days. Academic experts wrote opinion pieces explaining how Vanderbilt's actions fit into broader patterns of discrimination that had shaped American cities for generations. Professors used the case in classes about civil rights, urban planning, and economic justice. Documentary filmmakers reached out, wanting to tell the story. The tangible impacts on Jasmine's life came quickly. The hospital where Teresa worked issued a public apology and offered her full reinstatement with back pay, citing errors in the investigation process. The allegation that had triggered her suspension was quietly buried, never substantiated because it had never been true. The eviction case collapsed. The landlord's lawyer withdrew all charges, admitting there was no evidence of any lease violations. It became clear that the landlord had been pressured by Vanderbilt's associates, and now that the billionaire's power was crumbling, the pressure evaporated. King High School underwent a rapid transformation. The principal called Jasmine to his office again, but this time his expression was guilty rather than uncomfortable. "Jasmine, I owe you an apology. The district has reviewed the complaints against you and found them to be baseless. Your academic record is being fully restored. You're being reinstated to all extracurricular activities." "Who made those complaints?" Jasmine asked, though she already knew. Principal Morrison looked down. "We're not at liberty to say, but the source has been deemed unreliable." "The source was Richard Vanderbilt," Jasmine said flatly. "He's on the school board. He made donations. He pressured you to sabotage my education, and you did it." "I had to think about the whole school, the funding, the programs." "You had to think about what was right," Jasmine interrupted. "You knew I didn't deserve what was happening to me. But you went along with it anyway, because it was easier." The principal had no response. Jasmine left his office with her head high, vindicated but not satisfied. Justice shouldn't require a viral video and federal investigation. It should be automatic. The vandalized locker was repaired. Teachers who had changed her grades submitted corrections. The plagiarism accusation was formally retracted. Ashley Thompson approached her in the hallway, hesitant and ashamed. "I'm sorry I abandoned you. My mom was wrong. I should have been braver." Jasmine wanted to be angry, wanted to reject the apology, but she was too tired. Your mom was scared. Everyone was scared. That's how people like Vanderbilt win. They make everyone too frightened to stand up. "Can we still be friends?" Ashley asked hopefully. "I don't know," Jasmine said honestly. "I'll think about it." The scholarship opportunities multiplied. Universities reached out, impressed not just by her voice but by her courage and character. Berkeley offered a full ride. Northwestern sent a personal letter from the dean. Spelman provided a scholarship package that would cover everything, including housing and books. Record labels expressed interest, but Jasmine was wary. She had seen how the music industry could exploit young artists, especially young black artists. She wanted to go to college first, develop her craft, understand the business before signing any contracts. Monica Chen, true to her word, became a mentor. They spoke regularly on the phone, discussing music theory, performance techniques, and navigating the industry as a woman of color. Monica introduced Jasmine to other professionals, building a network of support. The civil rights law firm invited Jasmine to serve as the named plaintiff in the class action lawsuit. It was unusual to have someone so young in that role, but her story had become the face of the case. She agreed, understanding the responsibility and the risk. Discovery proceedings began. Vanderbilt's lawyers fought every subpoena, every deposition, every document request. But the evidence was overwhelming. Expert witnesses calculated that discriminatory lending practices had cost black families in Chicago alone an estimated $800 million in denied mortgages, excessive interest, and lost equity over 15 years. Multiply that by every city where Vanderbilt operated, and the number climbed into the billions. The human cost was even higher. Families forced to rent rather than buy, unable to build generational wealth. Children growing up in unstable housing. Communities denied the investment that homeownership brings. Dreams deferred or destroyed because a billionaire decided their zip code made them unworthy. As the legal battle intensified, Vanderbilt himself became increasingly erratic. His public statements grew more defensive and bizarre. He blamed the media, blamed political correctness, blamed reverse racism, blamed everyone but himself. His Twitter account became a stream of conspiracy theories and thinly veiled threats before his lawyers finally convinced him to stop posting. Then, one morning in late spring, Vanderbilt disappeared. His lawyers claimed they didn't know where he was. His family said they hadn't heard from him in days. Speculation ran wild. Had he fled the country? Was he hiding in one of his many properties? Had he done something desperate? Law enforcement launched a search. The FBI issued a warrant for his arrest on charges of wire fraud, housing discrimination, and witness intimidation. His passport was flagged. His accounts were frozen. For 3 days, the media buzzed with theories. Then came the news. Richard Vanderbilt had been arrested at a private airfield in Montana, attempting to board a jet bound for Dubai, a country without an extradition treaty with the United States. He was carrying $2 million in cash, multiple fake passports, and detailed plans for disappearing permanently. Video of his arrest went viral. The image of the once powerful billionaire in handcuffs being led to a police car symbolized something larger, that wealth and power had limits. That justice, delayed and difficult, was still possible. That the arc of the moral universe, as Dr. King had said, truly did bend toward justice, but only when people were brave enough to pull it in that direction. Jasmine watched the arrest footage with mixed emotions, relief, validation, but also awareness that this wasn't really the end. Vanderbilt would face trial, but the systems that enabled him remained. Other wealthy individuals and corporations continued similar practices, just more carefully. True change required more than one man's downfall. It required transformation of the structures that allowed discrimination to flourish. That same evening, something unexpected happened. A notification appeared on Jasmine's phone. An email from an encrypted address with no subject line. Her hands trembled as she opened it, memories of the last anonymous contact still fresh. The message was brief. I'm ready to tell my story. I worked for Vanderbilt for 12 years. I have evidence about projects in 6 more cities. Can we talk? It was signed only with initials. Jasmine forwarded it to Derek Washington and the legal team. By morning, they had connected with the whistleblower. By afternoon, the scope of the investigation had expanded dramatically. Vanderbilt's corrupt practices extended far beyond Chicago, affecting thousands more families across the country. The fight was growing. More victims came forward. More evidence emerged. More lawyers joined the case. What had started as one girl's humiliation at a talent show had become a nationwide reckoning with housing discrimination. But for Jasmine, the most dangerous moment was yet to come. Because cornered animals were at their most vicious, and Richard Vanderbilt, even in custody, still had loyal followers who believed his version of events, believers who thought he was the real victim, believers willing to act on his behalf. The class action lawsuit moved forward, with momentum that surprised even the experienced civil rights attorneys. Typically, such cases dragged on for years, but the public pressure and overwhelming evidence accelerated the process. Vanderbilt Properties, facing bankruptcy, began settlement negotiations. The company's remaining leadership, desperate to salvage anything from the wreckage, offered a preliminary settlement of $200 million to be distributed among proven victims of discriminatory lending practices. The offer was insultingly low given the scope of harm, but it represented acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The legal team pushed for more, armed with evidence that the actual damages exceeded $2 billion. Media coverage remained intense. Jasmine appeared on national news programs, always flanked by her mother and lawyers. She had learned to speak clearly and confidently about systemic racism, housing policy, and economic justice. She was still just 16 years old, but she spoke with the moral authority of someone who had faced injustice directly and refused to be silenced. Civil rights leaders embraced her story. She spoke at rallies alongside veterans of the movement who had fought for fair housing decades earlier. They welcomed her as part of a continuing struggle, linking her father's whistleblowing and her own courage to the long history of resistance against discrimination. Young activists claimed her as an icon. Street art appeared in Chicago showing her face alongside quotes from her viral song. "They can silence one voice, but they can't silence." The echo became a rallying cry at protests against various forms of injustice. Jasmine received hundreds of invitations, speaking engagements at universities, appearances at award ceremonies, offers to write a book, start a podcast, become a spokesperson for brands trying to align themselves with social justice. She turned down most of them, uncomfortable with being commodified, wary of becoming a symbol rather than a person. She accepted the scholarship to Berkeley, planning to study both music and social justice. She wanted to understand the systems she was fighting against, to be more than just a voice, but also an educated advocate for change. Graduation from King High School approached. Jasmine would leave as class valedictorian, her GPA restored and even improved. The school board, trying to distance themselves from Vanderbilt, established a scholarship in Marcus Carter's name for students pursuing careers in civil rights or community organizing. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. As spring turned to summer, the settlement negotiations intensified. Vanderbilt's company increased its offer to $500 million, then $700 million. The attorneys pressed for more, knowing they had leverage. A trial would expose even more damaging details, and the company couldn't survive additional scrutiny. Then Vanderbilt himself, held in federal custody awaiting trial on criminal charges, made a shocking move. He posted a rambling statement on social media through his legal team. The post blamed Jasmine for destroying an innocent man, accused her of fabricating evidence, claimed he was the victim of a politically motivated witch hunt. The post ended with Jasmine's home address and a thinly veiled call to action. The girl who has destroyed so many lives is living safely at this location. Perhaps she should experience some of the consequences she's inflicted on others. Someone should remind her that actions have repercussions. The post stayed up for 6 minutes before being removed by platform moderators. But 6 minutes was enough for thousands of Vanderbilt's most devoted followers to see it and share it. Within an hour, threatening messages flooded Jasmine's phone and email. Pictures of her house appeared online, posted by anonymous accounts, crude threats, promises of violence, racist slurs. Someone posted a fake bounty offer of $10,000 for anyone who would teach the girl a lesson. That evening, as Jasmine and Teresa were eating dinner, a brick crashed through their living room window. Glass exploded across the floor. The brick had a note attached. "You should have stayed silent." Teresa immediately called 911. Police arrived quickly, but the officers seemed dismissive. They took a report, but suggested maybe the family was exaggerating the threats or seeking attention. Only when Teresa mentioned that their lawyer was on the way did the officers' attitude change. By midnight, the police agreed to provide temporary protection. A patrol car would be stationed outside their building. But the officers made clear this wouldn't last more than a few days. They couldn't spare the resources indefinitely. The lawyers arranged for Jasmine and Teresa to temporarily relocate to an undisclosed location, a safe house funded by the civil rights organization backing the lawsuit. They packed hurriedly, taking only essentials, and left their apartment under cover of darkness. For the next 3 weeks, they lived in a suburban house 40 minutes from Chicago, the address known only to a few trusted individuals. Jasmine couldn't attend school graduation. She couldn't say goodbye to friends. She couldn't return to the neighborhood that had been her home for her entire life. The isolation was suffocating. Jasmine had gone from being surrounded by supporters to being trapped in protective custody. She did online interviews from undisclosed locations. She attended depositions via video conference. She lived behind closed doors while strangers who had never met her discussed whether she deserved to die for speaking the truth. Her mother was terrified constantly. Teresa jumped at every sound, checked and rechecked locks, slept with her phone in her hand. The stress took a physical toll. She lost weight. Her hair started falling out. Jasmine watched her mother deteriorate and felt crushing guilt. This was her fault. She had sung that song. She had refused to back down. She had pulled her mother into this nightmare. One night, unable to sleep, Jasmine sat on the floor of the safe house bathroom and cried. She pulled out her father's letter and read it again, searching for strength she didn't feel. "Don't seek revenge, seek change," Marcus had written. But what if seeking change destroyed everyone she loved? What if the cost was too high? A soft knock on the bathroom door. "Baby?" Teresa's voice, gentle and worried. Jasmine opened the door, and her mother sat beside her on the cold tile floor. They didn't speak for a long time. Finally, Teresa broke the silence. "Your father knew it would be hard. That's why he wrote that letter. He wanted you to know that hard doesn't mean wrong. Dangerous doesn't mean unimportant." "I just wanted to sing," Jasmine whispered. "I just wanted people to hear my voice. They heard it, baby. The whole world heard it. And they can't unhear it now." They sat together on the bathroom floor until dawn, drawing strength from each other the way they always had. 3 days later, law enforcement announced a breakthrough. Richard Vanderbilt's post inciting violence violated the conditions of his bail. A judge revoked his bail entirely and ordered him held in custody until trial. No more social media access. No more communication with the outside world, except through his lawyers. More importantly, the FBI arrested 7 people who had made specific, credible threats against Jasmine. The arrests sent a message. Threatening a minor because she exposed corruption was not protected speech. It was a crime, and it would be prosecuted. The immediate danger lessened but didn't disappear. Jasmine and Teresa remained in the safe house through June while the legal teams negotiated a final settlement. The offer reached $1.2 billion to be distributed among thousands of victims. Vanderbilt Properties would be dissolved. Its assets would be liquidated to pay the settlement and penalties. The company that had discriminated against generations of black families would cease to exist. Individual criminal charges against Richard Vanderbilt proceeded separately. Wire fraud, housing discrimination, civil rights violations, witness intimidation, incitement to violence. He faced the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. On a hot day in early July, Jasmine's lawyer called with news. The judge approved the settlement. "It's over. You won." Jasmine felt nothing for a moment. Then everything. Relief, vindication, exhaustion, and a strange emptiness. She had won, but victory felt different than she had imagined. Heavier. Harder. "When can we go home?" she asked. "Soon," the lawyer promised. "We're coordinating with law enforcement to ensure your safety. Maybe next week." Next week came, then the week after. Security concerns kept pushing back their return. The FBI had uncovered an ongoing plot by Vanderbilt extremists, people who saw the billionaire as a martyr and Jasmine as a villain. Threats continued, though less frequently. Finally, in late July, they were cleared to return home. Police escorts brought them back to their Southside apartment. Neighbors had cleaned and repaired everything. Fresh flowers filled the living room. "Welcome home," signs hung from doorways. The community had protected their home in their absence. Jasmine stood in her old bedroom, smaller than she remembered, and felt the weight of the last 4 months settle on her shoulders. She had started this journey as a 15-year-old girl who just wanted to sing. She was returning as someone different, someone who had seen how power worked, someone who understood the cost of speaking truth, someone who knew that justice was possible but never easy. Her phone buzzed. A message from the event organizers at the Grand Meridian Theater. They were hosting a ceremony honoring civil rights heroes in Chicago history. Would Jasmine be willing to perform? She stared at the message for a long time before responding. Yes, she would sing again. The Grand Meridian Theater looked exactly the same 6 months later, all marble and gold leaf and impossible grandeur. But Jasmine felt entirely different walking through the entrance. The last time she had been here, she had been terrified and humiliated. Tonight, she arrived as the guest of honor at a ceremony celebrating civil rights heroes who had fought discrimination in Chicago. The theater was packed, every seat filled. The audience looked different from that night in January. More diverse, more young people, activists and organizers alongside wealthy donors, families who had benefited from the settlement alongside longtime civil rights leaders. The atmosphere felt charged with possibility and purpose. Jasmine sat backstage, waiting for her turn to perform. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but not flashy, and her grandmother's silver necklace. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand, both of them nervous and excited. Monica Chen appeared backstage, radiant in a red gown. She had become more than a mentor over the months. She was a friend, an ally, and a reminder that courage could come from unexpected places. "Ready?" Monica asked with a warm smile. "I think so," Jasmine replied. "You'll be wonderful. You always are." The ceremony began with speeches honoring local heroes. A woman who had fought housing discrimination in the 1960s. A lawyer who had dedicated his career to defending victims of police brutality. A teacher who had integrated the city's schools. Each one had paid a price for their courage. Each one had persisted anyway. Then it was time for Jasmine to perform. The MC's introduction listed her accomplishments, the lawsuit, the settlement, the criminal convictions that had resulted. But Jasmine felt strange hearing her story told that way, reduced to bullet points and legal victories. It made everything sound cleaner and simpler than it had been. She walked onto the stage, and the audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 2 full minutes. She stood in the same spot where Richard Vanderbilt had mocked her, where she had been told she didn't belong, where everything had changed. But tonight, the energy was entirely different. Before singing, Jasmine approached the microphone and made an announcement. She had practiced these words, but still felt nervous saying them. "Thank you for this incredible honor. But I want to tell you about a decision I've made." She paused, gathering courage. "The settlement from the lawsuit awarded my family over $1 million in damages. That money could change our lives. Send me to college. Help my mother retire early. Give us security we've never had." The audience was silent, listening intently, but my father taught me something. He taught me that justice isn't just about individual victory. It's about creating change that helps everyone. So I'm donating my entire settlement to establish the Marcus Carter Foundation. Gasps and applause rippled through the theater. The foundation will provide free legal aid to families fighting housing discrimination. It will support whistleblowers who risk everything to expose corruption. It will fund education programs about fair housing and economic justice. It will make sure that what happened to my family and thousands of others becomes harder for the next generation to experience. Teresa was crying in the wings, proud and terrified in equal measure. That money represented security. But she knew her daughter was right. Some things mattered more than security, Jasmine continued. "I also want to share something personal. When I turned 16, my mother gave me a letter my father wrote before he died. I've never shared it publicly, but I want to read one part now." She pulled the worn paper from her pocket and unfolded it carefully. "My father wrote, 'If something happens to me, don't seek revenge, seek change. The fight for justice doesn't end with one person's victory or defeat. It's generational. They can silence one voice, but they can't silence the echo.'" Her voice caught on the words, but she pushed through. "Tonight, I'm not singing about revenge or anger or even about what happened to me. I'm singing about what comes next, about how one voice becomes many voices, about how individual courage inspires collective action, about transformation." The lights dimmed. A piano began to play, gentle and hopeful. This was a new song, one she had written during the months in hiding, processing everything that had happened. She sang about a girl who found her voice, about a father who taught her that integrity mattered more than safety, about a mother who showed her that love meant supporting someone even when you were terrified, about a community that rallied around her when she felt most alone. The lyrics moved through pain and fear toward something brighter, not naive optimism, not pretending the wounds were healed, but hope grounded in the reality that change, however difficult, was possible. That systems built by humans could be challenged by humans. That justice delayed was still worth fighting for. As she sang, she realized she was no longer that 15-year-old girl clutching her grandmother's music folder and trying to convince herself she belonged. She had learned that belonging wasn't something to be granted by gatekeepers. It was something to be claimed by being undeniably, authentically yourself. The song built to its conclusion. We are the echo of every voice that spoke the truth and paid the price. We are the echo of every hand that reached for justice when the cost was high. We are the echo getting louder, generation after generation. They can silence one voice, but listen. Listen to the echo. The final note rang through the theater, and this time, when the audience stood and applauded, Jasmine let herself feel it, not just the affirmation, but the connection. These weren't strangers clapping politely. These were people who understood that her story was part of a much larger story, that every person in this room, in their own way, was part of the continuing fight for a more just world. Backstage afterward, surrounded by people offering congratulations and opportunities, Jasmine found her mother. They held each other, not needing words. They had survived. They had won something real, not perfect, but real. They had honored Marcus Carter's memory not with bitterness, but with purpose. A young black girl, maybe 12 years old, approached shyly. She clutched a program and a pen, clearly wanting an autograph. "You're so brave," the girl whispered. "I want to be like you." Jasmine knelt down to meet her eyes. "You don't need to be like me. You need to be yourself, as fully and honestly as possible. That's the bravest thing anyone can do." She signed the program and added a note. "Your voice matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As the girl walked away beaming, Jasmine thought about the future, college at Berkeley in the fall, continuing to work with the foundation. Maybe more music, maybe activism, maybe both. The path wasn't clear, but it didn't need to be. She had learned that you didn't need to see the entire staircase to take the first step. She thought about Richard Vanderbilt in a prison cell, awaiting trial, his empire destroyed. She felt no joy in his suffering, only relief that he could no longer hurt others the way he had hurt her family and so many more. His downfall wasn't revenge, it was accountability, a distinction her father would have appreciated. She thought about all the families who would receive settlements, who would finally get some measure of justice after years or decades of being told their experiences didn't matter. She thought about the whistleblowers who would be protected and supported by the foundation. She thought about the young people who would grow up knowing that speaking truth to power was possible and important. The fight wasn't over. It would never be fully over. There would always be new Richard Vanderbilts, new systems of oppression, new battles to fight. But tonight, in this theater, surrounded by people who refused to accept injustice, Jasmine felt hope, not the fragile hope of naivety, but the resilient hope of someone who had walked through fire and emerged with her voice intact. The hall had gone quiet when she sang 6 months ago. Tonight, it echoed with applause and possibility. The silence and the sound were both powerful in their own ways, both necessary, both part of the same story. As Jasmine left the Grand Meridian Theater with her mother, stepping into the warm Chicago night, she thought about her father's words one more time. They can silence one voice, but they can't silence the echo. The echo was growing louder, and she was ready to sing again. "Now, I want to hear from you. What would you do if you witnessed someone being treated unjustly because of who they are? Would you speak up even if it meant facing consequences? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, or made you think differently about courage and justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful true stories about people who refuse to stay silent. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who might be finding their own voice right now. Together, our voices become an echo that can't be ignored. Thank you for listening to Jasmine's journey. May you always have the courage to speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right.